Welcome back to the channel. There are rules in small rural towns, rules people do not normally write down. In Whitehall, New York, there is one rule that stuck around quietly after the 1970s. If you're driving Abear Road late at night and something steps out in front of your headlights, you keep driving. Because in 1976, a police officer didn't. And what he claimed to see would eventually become one of the strangest law enforcement encounters in American cryptid history. Most Bigfoot stories come from hikers, hunters, or campers sitting around a fire. You expect those kind of encounters to live somewhere between folklore and campfire exaggeration. But Whitehall is different, because the sightings did not just come from the locals, they came from the police officers. And not just one strange report buried in small town rumor, but multiple sightings, official statements, and one encounter that ended in gunfire, which is how this case earned the nickname Cops vs. Bigfoot. And honestly, the deeper you look into this one, the stranger it gets. Whitehall sits at the southern edge of Lake Champlain, right along the New York-Vermont border. It is quiet, heavily forested, marshlands, rural backroads, and long stretches where your headlights are the only light source for miles. It's exactly the kind of place where strange stories tend to survive. But in the mid-1970s, what started happening here wasn't being treated like folklore. It was being treated like an active police concern. The story really begins during the summer of 1976. Whitehall police officer Brian Goss was on routine night patrol. Nothing unusual, just another quiet shift in a town where most people were asleep long before midnight. While driving along Abear Road, a stretch surrounded by dense woods pressing close to the pavement, Goss noticed movement ahead of his cruiser. At first he assumed it was a deer, completely normal for that area. But as the figure stepped fully into his headlights, Goss realized he was looking at something he couldn't fully identify. And according to his later reports, it was standing upright. Goss described the figure as massive, roughly 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, completely covered in dark hair. He estimated it could have weighed somewhere around 300 pounds. But what disturbed him most wasn't the size, it was how it moved. He said the creature didn't panic like a startled animal, it didn't bolt or scramble away from the light. It walked, deliberately, like it understood exactly where it was, what was happening, and exactly what it was doing. Goss watched as the figure crossed the road, turned towards the tree line, and disappeared into the woods. You might expect this to end as another strange late-night sighting, but this is where the story takes its first unusual turn, because Officer Goss actually filed an official police report. He did not brush it off or ignore it or blame it on the hours of the day. He considered this encounter valid enough to document it, which means this story did not stay a rumor, it became a report, and he would not stay the only witness for long. Just weeks later, a civilian named Patrick O'Connell reported encountering something similar in nearly the exact same area. Large, hair-covered, upright, and moving quickly through the dense vegetation. 2 witnesses describing the same impossible-sounding creature, in the same location, within weeks of each other. And that's when Whitehall started to pay attention. Residents began sharing stories that, until then, had mostly stayed private. Strange whistles in the woods at night, heavy footsteps around rural properties, large shapes moving just beyond the tree lines, always far enough away to stay unclear, but close enough to feel intentional and unsettling. And suddenly, police patrols in the area increased, not because officers believed they were hunting Bigfoot, but because something unknown was being reported enough times that it simply could not be ignored. Then came the encounter that pushed this legend into cryptid history, and this moment still separates Whitehall from mostly all other Bigfoot encounters. During a later patrol, Officer Goss reportedly encountered the creature again. Same road, same area, same late-night isolation. But this time, the sighting escalated. Accounts vary slightly depending on the retellings, but the core details remain consistent across versions of the story. Goss claimed he exited his patrol vehicle and attempted to approach the figure. Does this not already read like a typical horror movie? 'Cause I don't know about you, but if I see a 7-foot-tall unknown creature roaming around in the woods in front of my car, I'm not getting out. But Goss did, and according to his account, the creature reacted. He later described its behavior as aggressive, or at least defensive enough that he felt threatened. That's when he drew his service weapon. Goss stated he fired shots towards the creature as it retreated into the forest. No body was recovered, no blood trail was documented. Searches of the surrounding woods produced nothing that could definitively explain what he encountered. And that moment right there is what transformed this strange sighting into one of the most debated law enforcement cryptid cases in America. What makes this story even more unusual is what happened afterward. Officer Goss never recanted his account. He didn't claim misidentification. He didn't later describe it as a panic or confusion reaction. He maintained publicly that he believed he encountered something unknown, and other law enforcement personnel in the region would eventually acknowledge experiencing strange sightings or unexplained activity in the same area. None escalated to gunfire, but the pattern was enough to keep the mystery alive. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Whitehall began attracting national attention from Bigfoot researchers, journalists, and cryptozoologists. Investigators combed nearby forests, searching for tracks, hair samples, photographs, anything that could confirm the creature's existence. And despite increased attention, nothing definitive was ever found, which somehow makes the story feel even stranger. What sets Whitehall apart from other Bigfoot hotspots is that the town did not have a long history of Bigfoot folklore before this. Places like the Pacific Northwest have centuries of indigenous oral history, describing large forest-dwelling beings, whereas Whitehall's legend pretty much appeared overnight. And it was sparked largely from law enforcement credibility. I know I've stated before that I am normally a skeptic on most things. I actually am in a gray area with Bigfoot. I do love me some foot, not feet, do not go there. And this specific case also catches my curiosity due to the fact that police are trained observers. They're taught to remain calm under pressure, document details accurately, and separate imagination from reality. And from that perspective, Officer Goss's testimony carries serious weight. And on the other hand, skeptics will typically say this was a black bear sighting, and in their defense, bears can stand upright, and in low visibility settings, they can appear larger or more humanoid than they actually are. Add distance, darkness, adrenaline, and it's really easy then to imagine how something familiar could turn into something terrifying. Leave your thoughts on this in the comments below. But the real takeaway from this that separates Whitehall from most encounters is there was gunfire. At some point, an officer determined what he saw was posing enough of a threat to draw his weapon. Whether that reaction came out of fear or misidentifying an animal, or the fear from actually encountering something unknown, remains unsolved. Today, Whitehall has embraced its connection to the legend. The town hosts annual Sasquatch festivals and celebrates its place in Bigfoot lore. What began as unsettling late-night sightings eventually became part of the town's identity. Tourists now visit specifically because of the mystery that once had police scanning tree lines, searching forests, and documenting encounters they could not explain. And maybe that's why the Whitehall story still sticks with people. It sits right on that line between folklore and official record. Because when hikers say they saw a monster, it's pretty easy to dismiss. But when the people responsible for the public safety files a report because they feel threatened by something unknown, it's hard to ignore. Whitehall reminds us that sometimes you do not need physical evidence for the story to survive. Sometimes all it takes is that one quiet road, that one strange silhouette stepping into your headlights, and one officer realizing he may not be alone out there. Whether the officers of Whitehall encountered a misidentified animal, a trick of darkness, or something that science is yet to identify, their reports remain locked in American cryptid history as one of the rare moments where law enforcement asked a question they could not answer. And honestly, if you were driving that road at night and something stepped out in front of your headlights, would you stop to find out what it was, or would you keep driving? Let me know in the comments below. And as usual, stay curious, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.